Dauntless says, hey, Doc, when did you start having your own pet? And why did you adopt? Why did you opt to have a cat? Well, that's a good question. Thanks, Dauntless. Dauntless Queen with the questions. So let me, 2 stories. So one, long ago when the earth was young and I was a wee lad, about 10 or 11, plus or minus in a year or 2, we, as in my family, have always owned animals. Like, I don't remember ever growing up without animals. But then again, I left home when I was 15, so it was, you know. And this, by we, I mean like my dad, who I spent the majority of my time with. So I don't remember having any animals at my mom's place. So, but we had there was this calico cat. We didn't actually own it, but it just found that it liked our house. And we lived in the this is back in Shore Acres, Bay Point days. So, and this, it was like an orange and white striped like calico cat. Very cute kitty. Smaller than Loki. And she didn't have any claws. The owners had declawed her. And so, being a savage 10-year-old, she would come up and hang out, and we'd let her in. She'd come in through the window, and she would paw on the window, right? And like, it didn't make any scratch noises because she didn't have any claws, right? So she'd paw the window, and then we'd let her in, and then we'd feed her and love her. And then sometimes I would handle her, and she'd get all like she'd get all like pissy. She's like, no, don't handle this. And she'd like whack me in the face. I'd put my face up close to her, and she'd be like, whap. But it's a cat, and it doesn't have any claws, so it stunned me. I was like, whoa. But it was like, and so we had this cat. And so she came by, and that, you know, I would harass her, and she'd tell me she didn't like it, and she wouldn't run away afterwards. She'd just be like, and she would do like whack, 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 right? And I was like, oh, it's so cute. Like, it was, you know, and once I realized how fun that was, I couldn't help myself, you know. All right, and to Dauntless's question. So yeah, I mean, here's the thing is my dad and stepmom, and by the way, Dad, it's December 5th. Today is Saturday. Hey, Mom, hope you guys are out there and enjoying life. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And so yeah, so I grew up from it, you know, ever since I was with my dad. For the most part, we had horses. We had, like, at one point we had 7 horses. We had he was really into German Shepherds. He really liked German Shepherd dogs. And then his ex-wife, she was into Cocker Spaniels. And so I had a menagerie of like beasts, and it was my job, being the only child in the house, you know, that was left behind. It was to care for all the animals. So I would get up, and then they would take me to the pasture, and we'd feed the horses, and I would go to school with hay in my like hair, right? You know, and then yeah, I had to like feed and water the dogs. When you have like, we had like at one point, like in the city, we had like 8 or 10 dogs. And then we also had cats. We had like 4 or 5 cats, 6 cats. They were really into their animals. And it was my job, to take care of everything, right? And I like most kids that didn't want to do a lot of shit, didn't really like it. I didn't care for animals that much. I mean, I cared for a lot of animals, but that also meant that none of the animals were mine. It, you know, like the dogs would make dogs. You know, I think there were a couple attempts in there to like, you know, to become a breeder, you know, and sell dogs or something like that. And so I went from being this urban kid, you know, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there, maybe even closer to 8 or 9. So back then, you know, part of my routine is when you have a dozen dogs, like, that's not like feed the dog and leave, you know, like you gotta, like, we had kennels, and you had to like get into the kennels, and then like you had to like put the food out there and the water, you know, and it wasn't like I was cold-hearted, calloused. It was just a job. Like I was indentured servitude, and I didn't like it. It wasn't all bad, but I didn't like it. And let's see here. So one time One time, I was a bad little DrBossKey. And you know what I did? Because I did this all the time. Not this thing I did that was bad, but I take the garden hose out. And you got to water all the dogs. 12 dogs. It's a lot of containers to fill up. And it wasn't like I had to do it every day, but and then you got to scoop the poop out of the kennels and the fleas and this stuff. So there are a couple things. So once, I really wanted to go hang out with my friend, probably Lee or something, right? Like this was back then, Lee. This was before I came back to the Bay Area. I accidentally left the garden hose. I left the water on from the garden hose, right? And I forgot. And then I went out and I played, with my friends or whatever. And then I came back at night and the neighbor was like, did someone burst a pipe, or we're getting flooded out in the backyard? And I was like, oh shit. And I ran into the backyard and it was a swamp. It was a total swamp. And I turned off the water at that point. But my dad was pissed. My dad was so pissed that he grabbed me by a leg and he held me up in the air. He was a big dude, by one ankle. He was pissed, and then spanked my ass upside down. It's 8 or 9, somewhere in that space. Miss Jessie says I've done that before. Yeah. Everything turned out. It was all right. But as a result, animals, and this is a good thing, right? In some ways, animals are more of a commodity, things you just have, not things that you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on trying to keep alive for another couple of years, right? I never in my life would that be a thing. So that's one part, animals, right? And then a second story, when you have a lot of animals, they die. And so we had a couple of Cocker Spaniels and they died. I think they got old or whatever. So these Cocker Spaniels died and we had them on the side of the house. And I'm full service, child human labor. So I had to open up the side gate and I went in there and I had to put the dogs in basically garbage bags, or where we put them in. I think we put them in a garbage bag. You can't just put them in the garbage, you got to take and dispose them, or you got to bury them. 2 stories there. But so I go in there and I think it was just one dog that died. And then I bagged up the dog, poor doggy. I don't even really know the dog's name. And I was wearing sweatpants. They're gray sweatpants or something like that. And I get this dog and I've had to put it, I put the dog out to the side so we can take the dog and, get it disposed of properly. And I looked down at my sweatpants and I was like, they were supposed to be gray sweatpants, but they look like black sweatpants. And they were black sweatpants because that was how many fleas I had on my sweatpants. I looked down and it was a sea of fleas. Freaked me out a little bit. I was like, whoa, Jesus, sweet Jesus, the fleas. Because, the dog died. Fleas are like, shit, we're done. And we had apparently a flea problem. You got a dozen dogs, like fleas, man. Yes, I looked down and it was just both my legs because I was the warmest thing there. And it was just a horde of fleas. Literally, I thought I was wearing a different color pants. It freaked me out. Lord of the Fleas. I am Lord of the Fleas. So another maybe a slightly Dr. Boss, please. Maybe a slightly not as pleasant story. So we went from being urban, having a house on a street next to neighbors on both sides, to then being essentially country folk. We got a little piece of property. It was, I learned a lot of good stuff about property and things there. Didn't have anything on it basically when we moved onto it. And yeah, that's pretty much what cats are good for. And so we took our menagerie of beasts all with us. That was like a carnival. And the cats and dogs start to multiply. So we went from having 8 or 9 dogs to 18 dogs. I think at our top count, we were 18 or 19 dogs. And I think we had 24 or 26 cats. my dad, he's all into wagons. Like he's very much into wagons. He's kind of like that. We had so many cats that, of course, whose job was it to feed the animals? Never fails. I don't even know what these people did when I moved away. Like they had to feed their own animals, right? But they were getting a good deal out of me. And so my dad had these wagons, and one wagon in this particular case. And so when you have 24 cats, you can't just put food in one bowl. Otherwise, they'll just rip each other apart, right? And like some cats were more angry than other cats, right? And so I had like 3 or 4 like saucepans that you cook with, and then we bought our animal food in 20 and 40 pound bags, right? Like it was an ordeal, right? And so in the country, I would go and feed the animals, give the horses the hay, sometimes some grain, give the dogs their dog food, right? And we had most of the dogs, like there are a few that ran around, but most of the dogs were on their own runs, which basically just means that it's a cable that you put the dog on, and then you attach it to like 2 points, right? Like 2 trees. And so they can run back and forth, and they have their little doggy houses and stuff like that. And then, so I would go and feed all of them. But for the cats, no, you don't put them in the cages. So for the cats, I would put then the cat food in each of these pans, and then I had 2 pans that were on top of the wagon. So then all the cats would be everywhere. And then I'd be like fun police, right? Some cats would be all like getting pissy, and I'd be like, hey, don't be pissy, kitty. So, and also when you have like, I don't know, 18 dogs, we had like 6, 7, 8 Cocker Spaniels. Cocker Spaniels are small, relatively small. They're not like the big dogs, not like Great Danes or anything. But their fur, it gets matted because they're also pretty low to the ground. So every few months I would have to go and like cut all the dreads out of the, like shave the dogs basically. So my job. And then, I don't know, once a week, twice a week, I had to like scoop all the poop out of the horse stalls. We had a couple horse stalls, but, and then also in the pastures. Yeah. I mean, these were some of the things that I was like, damn, I have a part-time job taking care of a bunch of beasts, or I could go out in the world. I made a little beast. His name, Seth. Brushit says, amazing story. There's stories. Yeah, everyone's got it differently, right? It's fun to share sometimes. Thanks, Brushing. I appreciate that. So back to your question, Dauntless. So fast forward, I basically went out into the world, and my son was ready to be born. Like I said, I was very close to 16. I was on the backside of 15. And I had a lot to get done, and my indentured servitude at home didn't pay the bills, and I had a job, and I finagled everything to keep that job. That was my first job, working at Taco Bell. I was a taco slinger basically, and it was very liberating to work and be in and just take pride in being good at something. One thing I learned from my father is work hard. I mean, if anything you can ever instill in your child's life, that was one of the things. Work hard. Maybe a little too hard in some cases, but work hard. And maybe like take more time for the people around you. But work hard. Yeah.